Hello everyone, welcome to another Flesh and Blood video. It's almost time to take a look at Part the Mistveil, but before we do that, since right now at time of recording we don't have all the cards, we will have all the cards this week, but this will be the video going up this week. Next week we can take a look at the deck reviews. But for now, we need to take a look at the last of the heroes from Outsiders that we did not take a look at when that set came out, and that is Uzuri Switchblade. A lot of people are definitely going to be trying the new Assassin new, and I feel like, people that play Contract Uzuri are just going to play that. So this is Contract Uzuri, the deck that some of you may want to play before you get your hands on new, so you can learn some of those banishing and other fatigue type plays. Of course, I don't think new is going to play at all like Uzuri, but I think this is a deck list that might feel a little similar in some ways. Instead of using Uzuri's ability, you just play other reactions for new, so you'll still have some of the same themes. With all that, let's get into the deck list. Starting with the hero, Uzuri is a 40 health 4-int assassin. It's the same old standard stuff, nothing too interesting to talk about. Her ability is a little wordy though. It reads, once per turn attack reaction, banish a card from your hand face down. That's a cost. For the effect, you turn that banished card face up, and if the card you reveal is an attack action of cost 2 or less, you put an attacking card with stealth on the active chain link on the bottom, and then you put the card that you banished from the effect into play as the new attacking card. Pretty much, it's just 2 free mana cheat. Really strong, lets you play a lot of really interesting cards with her effect. There are 2 ways you can build Uzuri. Because she has a mana cheat ability, you have a red line based list that just wants to play as aggressive as possible, using her effect to cheat out some bigger attacks like a CNC or her own Shakedown. But Contract Uzuri tries to play a longer game, use effects to banish the opponent's cards and disrupt them. For the equipment, Crown of Providence is the premier headpiece. You'll see Contract Uzuri's play Mask of Perdition. This list is not on it, however, you can include it if you so want to. It is a card that helps you with your contracts. You don't play it in every matchup either, you still play the Crown of Providence as well, but Crown of Providence is the general headpiece you'll be bringing into most of your matchups. Final Spring Tunic is the only chess piece this deck plays, since there are so many things you can do with it. You can get a free looking for scrap, you can get an extra swing with a dagger, you can play a Death Touch off of a Codex of Frailty. There are just so much stuff you can do with this. You'll be using it every time it's up. There are so many good things to say about Tunic for this deck. In fact, I would say that this is probably the only deck in the game I think Tunic is required. So, most people should have it though. It's been reprinted a lot. I think it's fairly on cheap right now. So if you want to play Uzuri and you don't have a Tunic, consider this one. You also probably need it for new as well, since right now we don't know if she's getting a new chess piece that she can use. For the gloves, we play Flick Knives. Flick Knives offer a ton of utility, especially with the daggers that we're playing. Flick Knives pretty much just lets you get a guaranteed hit off with a dagger, but you destroy the dagger afterwards. This can end games because you can always think of this as 2 free extra damage, as well as the utility to maybe land more. If you react with this when your opponent plays a D-react, you throw a nerve scalpel, you shrink the D-react, stuff like that. And then finally, Black Tech Whispers. This is just the best shoe we can be playing. No reason to play the Snapdragon Scalers, since We need some way to spend our silver other than sacking them, which that's still okay, but we want to be able to buy these back, get more go-agains, get more health because these are battle worn. Some really nice utility and a great card to have. I didn't talk about the weapons, so let's talk about those. Assassin weapons are pretty unique, but all of them are daggers. We are playing a Spider's Bite and a Nerve Scalpel. Both are one-handed daggers. They both cost 2, attack for 1, and have go again. They have piercing, which means if they're defended by an equipment, they get +1. The only one to not have piercing is actually New's dagger coming out next set. And when these, actually, Gravenclaw might not also not have piercing, but we're not pretty much the disruptive daggers all have piercing. Nerve Scalpel makes it so when it hits a hero, the next time they defend with their reaction this turn, it has -1 block, and Spider's Bite makes it so when the next time they defend with an attack action, they have -1 block, and it's all. So that doesn't really matter for Nerve Scalpel because they come in one by one. But if you hit them with the Spider's Bite and you throw a 6 at them, if they want to block that 6, they need to put 3 attacks in front if they only have attacks in their hand. And all of the attacks are 3 block. So Spider's Bite is generally the better one to have, and you play Nerve Scalpel to mess with reactions of your opponent with the Flick Knives, but both are just the best ones we can be playing. Before we look at the main board, let's take a look at the rest of our equipment. We have 4 other equipment. 3 Arcane Barrier, Arcane Lantern, Norrune Gloves, and Norrune Boots. Gloves and Lantern will only come in when we are playing against Wizard. The reason for this is because if we're ever swinging 2 daggers into Kano, we're probably losing the game, so we'd rather have a Lantern. And because we're playing only 1 dagger, why would we ever want to flick it at a Kano? So we're playing the Norrune Gloves, as well as they could always just respond to that anyway. And then finally, Norrune Boots are here for our usual AB needs, just because they're not bad. Black text, we do lose out on the black text, but into the Rune Blades, we'd rather be disruptive than aggressive, I would say. And we have other ways to help prevent Arcane as well, like Sigils, and Humble is good into the Rune Blades as well. But we'll talk about those when we get to our sideboard options. And then the last piece of equipment is Balance of Justice. This is just a better crown into the matchups that it's actually useful, meaning Art of War matchups, Blood Rush Bellow matchups, other things of the sort, where they will be drawing 2 cards in 1 turn. Very good pickup from heavy hitters if you still need it. Now, let's take a look at the main board. First, we need to talk about the most important cards in the deck, the stealth cards. This deck plays 12 stealth cards, all of which being blue. Backstab, Infect, Isolate, and Sedate. You'll see a lot of Uzuri lists also play Rainbow Isolate, as well as another red one, such as Infect. These are mostly the redliner lists. This list wants to usually have one of these each turn to swap into something else, but it's not as important. But these are the best blues we can be playing. Isolate and Backstab are the 2 best. Backstab prevents our opponent from playing defense reactions, which is really good when we go into a CNC. As well as Isolate, having Dominate is really good when our opponent doesn't have a defense reaction, letting us get a near guaranteed hit off of any of our swap ends. Infect and Sedate are just threats of tokens that can be decently good. There are probably some stealth cards next set that you might play instead of these if you decide to stick with Uzuri, but these will probably stay in some fashion since their tokens are just still pretty useful. Now we can look at the swap-ins. These are the cards that you'll want to be putting into play with Uzuri's effect. We have 4 of them that cost 2. Those are the main ones you'll be swapping in. But there are also a few others that you can swap in that don't cost 2. Yes, you'll get less mana cheat. They're less effective. Well, one is less effective, I'd say. one of them is as good as the 2-cost ones, but we'll start with the 2-cost ones. The most basic one, Command and Conquer. Everyone knows it, everyone loves it. Of course, if you don't have it, you can try Wreak Havoc instead. I would recommend Wreak Havoc this time instead of something like Humble or Erase Face. I suppose you could play Erase Face or Amnesia because they might be good into the new meta. Maybe not Erase Face, but Amnesia could be pretty good into Ninja. Although CNC is the best. The reason I'd recommend Wreak Havoc though is because they are the most similar. Wreak Havoc is the free-to-play CNC, as they say. So, but if you have CNCs, definitely play those. Shakedown is Uzuri's specialization. This is a 2 for 6 at red with the effect, if you've played or activated an attacker action this chain link, Shakedown has, when this hits a hero, choose red, yellow, or blue, they reveal their hand. Banish a card of the chosen color. Shakedown is a way to harass your opponent's hand. Uzuri's main game plan is to block pretty well and then use her amazing 2-card hands to threaten your opponent with either disruption or high damage. Shakedown does both. If a Shakedown hits, your opponent's usually going to lose a card from their hand, either it be a resource they need to pitch or a strong power card. Shakedown gains its effect automatically if you swap it in through Uzuri's effect, but if you're just playing it raw, you can use something like Black Tech Whispers or Flick Knives to actually activate it, making it a very versatile card in the deck. The newest card to be released that you'll want to be swapping in is Already Dead. This is a 2 for 6 that has a contract. Contracts are an effect that generates a silver token whenever you banish a specific card from your opponent. Already Dead requires you to banish non-action cards. Note that contracts are live as long as they're on the combat chain, so if you use black text to get a bonus action and play another contract, they will stack, as well as cards without contract can still complete contracts, such as Shakedown. If you have a Leave No Witness or an Already Dead on that chain, and you hit with the Shakedown and get the effect to banish, you can trigger the contract. It can also trigger multiple times, like most of the contracts in the deck do, because they banish multiple cards. Already Dead has an on-hit to banish the top card of that hero's deck and a card that is defending, any defending card as well. So if your opponent's blocking with an equipment on another chain link already, you can get rid of it. Really strong versus decks that want to keep around their equipment. It was pretty good versus Dromai because it always had the threat of banishing their furnace, so they really never blocked with it. And going into the new meta, this could banish things like Phantasmal Footsteps from Enigma or Prism, as well as some other pretty key equipment like Apex Bonebreakers or Scabskin Leathers from Brute. This is usually not the best thing you could be swapping into, since it's just a contract. It's not disrupting their hand or arsenal like the other 3 main swap-ins, but it is still a very good tool for the deck to have. The final main swap-in is actually one of our blues, and that's Surgical Extraction. It may only be a 2 for 4, but this one, on hit, banishes the top card of the hero's deck and lets you look at their hand and take a card from it. A great disruptive threat that can generate you a lot of silver, since blues are a very nice thing to take out from your opponent. This one is easier to block, yes, but that's perfectly fine since we play a lot of ways to make sure that it does actually hit. The rest of the cards we'd prefer to swap in are Annihilate the Armed, a 1 for 5 that doesn't have any bonus unique banishment, but cares about banishing attack actions, and on hit just banishes the top card of that hero's deck. Death Touch, a card that can't be played from hand, but instead offers a powerful on hit to create our choice of any of the 3 Plague tokens, Frailty, Inertia, or Blood Rot Pox when it hits a hero. And Eradicate, a 1/4 that wants us to banish yellow cards and banishes cards off the top for each damage that we've dealt, letting us use effects like Cut to the Chase that pump it to get more damage through to banish more cards. The last few attacks in the deck are just some pretty good ones. Leave No Witness can be swapped in, but it's better played off of a Codex. This is a 0/4 that wants us to get rid of red cards and banishes the top card of our opponent's deck as well as a card in their arsenal, making this a great threat off a Codex, since Codex will take a card out of their opponent's hand and this will take their arsenal, giving them a -2, or if they block with cards in their hand, possibly a -3 if they want to save that card they got back. Looking for a Scrap is a card that works very nicely inside of these Assassin shells, since we do play a lot of attacks with 1 base power. Looking for a Scrap has an additional cost where we may banish a card of 1 power from our graveyard, either it be one of our stealth attacks or one of our daggers. And then it gains +1 and go again if we do that. This card can come in on very wide turns as well as off of our Tunic, which can be pretty nice. And then the last attack in the deck is Enlightened Strike. This is just a very versatile card, one of the best in the game, and great for a deck like this who wants to play 2-card hands very often. Arguably a top contender for the best 2-card hand in the game, alongside something like a CNC. Finally, let's move on to the rest of the deck. Starting with the 1 action the deck plays, Codex of Frailty. This is a card that every assassin should be playing. It's a card that lets you put an attack action from your graveyard face down into your arsenal. You also force your opponent to do the exact same, and then each hero that does discards a card. But since you're the one actually setting it up, that's fairly negligible. As well as it creates a Ponder for you and a Frailty for your opponent, making that card they just got in their arsenal weaker. The best targets for this are, of course, Leave No Witness and Death Touch, but you could always grab yourself a Command and Conquer, or even a Shakedown if you have the resources for it. For reactions, we play 3 copies of Yellow Shred and 2 copies of Blue Shred. Blue Shred is playable, but it's mainly here to be pitched. If we need it later, it's great. And Yellow Shred is a good pitch value, letting us pitch it for any of our 2-cost attacks if we need to, or for a dagger, and it -3 is a block, and most cards block for 3. We also play 2 Cut to the Chase, an attacker action that gives +3 to a contracted attack, as well as lets us peek at the top card of our opponent's deck and lets us put it on the bottom. This is here for our contracted attacks, only 2 of it since we don't have too many, but this can push over Surgicals, Eradicates, Leave No Witnesses, or Already Deads, even Annihilate the Armed if we really need that banish or just want to push damage. Very good card. Works wonders in a deck like this for opponents that don't expect you actually playing it. And then the final 2 cards in the main board are just some defensive options. We want to play 2-card hands, so we would like to be pretty defensive. Sink Below and Fate Foreseen are those options, giving us some great D-reacts with some nice utility on them. Next, let's move on to the sideboard. This deck has a 58-card main board, which means we'll be adding in 2 cards every game. That will depend on our matchups. Frailty Trap will come in versus a lot of aggro decks. Giving a Frailty token will help you by making their weapons weaker, especially into something like Ninja, who requires the use of Kodachis, most likely, or any other aggro deck that wants to play from Arsenal, possibly even Ranger. Humble is an attack that is good into heroes that really care about their hero ability. It's also another thing you can swap in with Uzuri's ability. And we have one Remembrance and one Spreading Plague. This is for matchups that try to take you late. Spreading Plague can inflict a lot of damage in the late game when your opponent overblocks an attack, and Remembrance can let you shuffle back in key pieces. Although into some of those late game matchups, you could consider bringing in more cards. Just if you're trying to do that, note that your deck will have some consistency issues. Try to stay at 60 as much as possible. Unless, of course, you're trying to fatigue someone, which Contract can easily do. And if so, that's perfectly fine. Play as many cards as you want then. But just letting you know with the Spreading Plague and the Remembrance for those matchups that you do play 60. The final cards in the sideboard are Oasis Respite and Sigil of Solace. These can come in as you please, but these are mainly here for our Wizard matchup. Because we're mainboarding 3 Sink Below and 3 Fate Foreseen, these will just get swapped out for the Oasis and Sigil if we play against a Kano. Uzuri has a fairly hard time versus Kano, since other than randomly hitting a card off the top they care about, the only way we can disrupt them is CNC and Leave No Witness. Our Codex doesn't affect them, so being able to get them low enough and then stop them when they go for their combo is an important thing that we need to be doing in that matchup. But that's going to be all. Not a very long video. I think Uzuri is a pretty basic deck to look at, but it is a fairly interesting deck to play. So without me actually showing you gameplay, which might take a while to get, it's kind of why I don't put gameplay in too much of these videos, because gameplay is a little long and I do talk a lot. But if you look up any Uzuri gameplay, even at big events, Uzuri is a deck that you see on camera pretty often just because of how good it is into aggro decks, how good it is at disrupting them. And it takes games off of those aggro decks, and right now aggro is pretty strong. So you can easily see gameplay that way, as well as you could even have a local Uzuri player at your store, like I do. But with all that, I hope you guys enjoyed. Next week, as I said, we'll take a look at part the Mistveil, probably starting with the Mystic cards, and that includes all of the heroes and the new playstyles with the new cards. So I hope you all had a good day, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.